Hello, everybody, and welcome to your show Political Landscape of this Friday, the 26th of April 2024. Today we will talk about a very good subject with Professor Chossudovsky, because in a recent article it was talking about the fact that the neo-Nazi parties of the so-called Ukrainian coalition government are actively supported by the international community, namely our governments. One of the big questions you raise, Professor, is how it is that these governments are supporting and financing the genocides in these two theaters of war, especially since the budget to support these theaters are very, very high. Hello today.
Yes, good afternoon. Again, delighted to be on the program. We're in a realm of complexity. Let me just mention that the US Congress have followed up in allocating financial support to the broader war theater. It seems as if there's only one war rather than two war theaters. But of course, the war in the Middle East, or the war against Palestine, is part of a broader Middle East war. And then in other words, they're allocating money to these two war theaters. Approximately $60 billion for Ukraine and something of the order of $30+ billion for Israel. And it comes from it goes through the legislative process in the United States. In other words, the House of Representatives and the Senate. The Senate had already envisaged this back in February. There were divisions between the Republicans and the Democrats, but now it seems that there's a consensus. And I think really what is, maybe let me quote President George W. Bush when he says, when you talk about war, you're talking about peace. Now that of course that's an idiotic statement, but it is within the new normal of U.S. foreign policy, because they're saying, well, we have to send weapons to them, and we have to support them, etc., etc. But it's mainly weapons in the billions. And they don't talk about the $1.3 trillion budget which is allocated to nuclear war. I won't get into that. We discussed it about a week ago. But the thing is that first of all, it's this notion that you can actually develop a peace project while increasing your ability to wage war. It's diabolical in the sense that what the world wants at the grassroots is peace. And peace requires dialogue, negotiation, diplomacy. And the only avenue that the United States of America is proposing essentially is more weapons to Israel, more weapons to Ukraine, which of course has a hidden agenda, or not so hidden agenda. This is, of course, profit for the military industrial complex. The arms manufacturers, they are receiving most of that money, goes into their pockets or goes into debt repayment, etc. But there we are now in a situation where we have two war theaters, and the first war theater, from an ideological standpoint, is waged on behalf of Zionism. But mind you, Zionism is not a monolithic doctrine either. There are different nuances. In fact, I don't think it really is Zionism at all. It's a criminal undertaking. But again, it is there to wage a genocide against the Palestinian people. It has reached a point where Palestinians, tens of thousands have been killed. The whole urban space has been destroyed. People are in a situation of starvation. It's all engineered. But if you look worldwide, our governments will side with Israel, will endorse Israel, and those who actually take a stance worldwide against Israel are considered to be anti-Semitic. Now, that is a nonsensical statement because, first of all, many Jewish communities are participating in this movement against the Netanyahu government. That's for one. And secondly, I would say that what is prevailing in this criminal undertaking against the people of Palestine is anti-Semitic because Palestinians are Semitic. They're Semitic. Going back to antiquity, they are the people of the Levant, of the Eastern Mediterranean, of Mesopotamia, and they share a common culture with the Jewish people, and this is something which is understood. There's a common culture. There are people who have a similar language. The language which was spoken at the beginning of Christianity, and it was a Jewish population resisting the Romans. It was Aramaic, and now Aramaic was the language of Jesus Christ, but it's a language which is similar to Hebrew, and it's also similar to Arabic. Okay, and the religions are contiguous. I'm not going to get into that, and I'm not a theologian, but again, if it's very well understood, and anybody can check it up on Google, the Palestinians are Semites. Okay, so who is the anti-Semitic arm there? It's Netanyahu. He's anti-Semitic, and he doesn't recognize the fact that the Semites have a history going back to the antiquity, and it's the Jews, the Arabs, and various other ethnic groups in that region, and so that there we have a genocide which is being waged against the people of Palestine. And then if you look at what's happening in Ukraine, and this is really the object of my writings, my recent writings, is that the neo-Nazi parties, which are integrated in this coalition government, but they ultimately they call the shots because they are in control of intelligence, the military, the paramilitary with the Azov battalion. They are also in control of the Ministry of the Interior, and they also are they're also involved in international diplomacy. And these two Nazi parties were involved in the Euromaidan in 2014, which was a coup d'etat, and it was supported by the United States. Well, we recall the role of Victoria Nuland in that regard. But the thing which is, well, I would call this as a smoking gun, because these parties, they are not neo-Nazis. Neo means new. They're not neo. They are Nazi parties which were aligned with Adolf Hitler essentially upon the outset of Operation Barbarossa in June 1941, and they were there, and they were collaborating, actively collaborating with the Wehrmacht and with the Third Reich. And this is in other words, today's parties, their heritage comes from the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists, the OUN. And it was the OUN of Stepan Bandera. They called it OUNB. And at the outset of Operation Barbarossa, that was in June 1941, and in coordination with the Third Reich's death squads, which were called Einsatzgruppen. The Einsatzgruppen were essentially killers, the killer groups. In other words, they would go around, and that was one way of targeting the Jewish population. But now let me give you, I mean, this is a very broad subject matter, but I can say, because I've researched it and it's known and documented, is that the members of the OUN, the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists, which were aligned with Nazi Germany and collaborated with Nazi Germany, they were instrumental in the killings in the city of Lvov, which is in the western region of Ukraine, in other words, Galicia. And the evidence points to the fact that there were not only massacres, but there were deportations of more than 100,000 Jews. And it was part of the pogroms, what they call the pogroms, where Jews were massacred starting in 1941 and throughout Germany's occupation of Ukraine up until 1944. And they had the support of the Ukrainian nationalists. I cite, that's with regard to Lvov pogroms. The massacres were perpetrated by Ukrainian nationalists, specifically the OUN, German death squads, Einsatzgruppen, from starting in June of 1941, July 1941. But they were collaborating throughout the period from 1941 to 1944. Now, all this can be verified, and there are important statements by the OUN, and I quote, because the Nazi parties in the 1940s had a newspaper, and it's on record. They say all elements that reside in our land, whether they are Jews or Poles, must be eradicated. Okay, now they were participating in the eradication of the Jewish population. It's the Holocaust. Now there we are, and there, let me be very specific. There we are with a whole bunch of Western governments, in fact, possibly all of them, with some exceptions, which are supporting a government in Kiev which participated, I'm talking about the Nazi parties, which participated in the Holocaust. Okay? Now,
to ask you a question concerning the financing, because what we can question is the behavior of the United States, because they finance and make others do the work for them, and also the support. Is it coming only from the Democrats or other parties?
Well, that's a very important question. First of all, there was I go back to February in the U.S. Senate. They had an amount of something of the order of $95 billion to be divided between Israel and the Ukraine. And then there was some kind of disagreement between the Republicans and the Democrats. But now, as a result of Donald Trump took a stance on that, and without getting into the technicalities of that budget, but in essence, that will go through. It will go through the House of Representatives, and it will go through the Senate, and then all that money will be sent off to Israel on the one hand and Ukraine on the other. But that money essentially probably will not even it will be used to pay back debts, to pay back weapons that are still to be delivered, and in effect it won't contribute in any way to resolving social problems, let's say in Ukraine. It is money also which is there to sustain the post-war, I'm not even sure whether that term is correct at this stage, but these two war theaters essentially are there to support an economic agenda. Now, in the case of Palestine, the project of expropriating the wealth of Palestine and excluding Palestinians from their homeland and moving them on to the Sinai Desert in an agreement already signed, I would say, a couple of years back with Egypt. All that is intent upon acquiring tremendous wealth of maritime natural gas, which has a border with Gaza, and which Israel obviously is going to take possession under present circumstances. But it's not only the coastline of Palestine, or the Palestinian territory. It goes right up the Levant, up to northern Syria. And there's a tremendous wealth in maritime gas. And the broader agenda, of course, and that's more of the United States of America, is to confront Iran, because Iran has tremendous wealth in oil and natural gas, apart from being an important and populated power in the Middle East. Now, so that in effect, the ideological dimensions behind Zionism and whatever Ukrainian nationalism, and Ukrainian nationalism now, which has been, it's not to say that there weren't other. I mean, this was all manipulated, but the Nazi parties, of course, they have their ideology, and they are responsible for having committed crimes against humanity under the auspices of the Nazi government during World War II. Now, we can't, and I said, look at Germany. Germany has legislation against Nazi parties or Nazi symbols, but it allows its government to finance the Nazi parties in Ukraine, which were complicit with Nazi Germany during World War II, and it's corroborated. It's corroborated. They were responsible for the death of more than 100,000 Jews and Poles and so on. So that there we have, in a sense, a situation where the OUN, the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists, was complicit in the crimes of Nazi Germany, and our governments, which claim to be committed to social democracy, they're not, are actively supporting a Ukrainian Nazi movement today, which collaborated with Nazi Germany's occupation forces during World War II. That's exactly what we've got now. And that's an unspoken history. We have the class politique of Western Europe, almost in consensus and agreement with one another, without without necessarily begging the question, well, what are these Nazi governments? Well, most of the media will not even mention the existence of Nazi governments. But my position in this regard is that that by ignoring the World War II legacy of these Nazi parties, both the mainstream media and the Western governments are in fact complicit of what we might describe as a denial of the Holocaust and the role that they played in the Holocaust. So there we are, I think really what is troublesome is that in these two war theaters we have criminality. We have criminality in the Netanyahu government. We have a government which is in violation of international law, the Genocide Convention, and then in Ukraine we have a dominance of Nazis which were involved in crimes against humanity during World War II, and they continue to do that.
Yes. I wanted to ask you something regarding the course of wars and the consequences on the distribution of budgets. How will this put more pressure on the countries and also on the people?
Well, in effect, those budgets, particularly the budget in Ukraine, because in effect, the budget for Israel doesn't need that money. That money will go into to engineering the acquisition of assets and so on. But as far as Ukraine is concerned, they are sending military aid and weapons, knowing that in fact the Ukrainians will never win the war. Well, the Ukrainians cannot win the war because they don't have the military capacity to confront Russia, and all the weapons that have come in are dysfunctional. But the hidden objective, the unspoken objective, is the privatization of Ukraine by BlackRock, which is a portfolio investment firm which has a tremendous leverage and assets and so on. They have already signed an agreement with the Zelensky government, and they will be taking over, and they will bring in now. BlackRock is a composite of, but it has very large participation of the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers and JP Morgan Chase and so on. And what they're doing is essentially, and it's a new stage in the evolution of global capitalism. They are privatizing an entire country. But to privatize Ukraine, you have to destroy Ukraine. And it's this chaos and destruction and the loss of life and the refusal on several occasions to enter into peace negotiations. Well, they've entered into peace negotiations with Russia on 3 separate occasions, and they have also denied well, they had the Istanbul negotiations where they in fact signed an agreement, and then what happened? The government or somebody in the government, actually even one of the negotiators was assassinated on the Ukrainian side. They had agreed with the Russians, and that was shortly after. That was in 2022, in March of 2022, and then it was the object of sabotage, largely sabotage by the Western powers. And now you have another element which is very important, is that the United States has stated it is calling upon its so-called allies. They're not his allies, France, Germany, and so on. They said, well, you as members of NATO, you should send troops to Ukraine, and we don't need necessarily to intervene in these endeavors. But they know perfectly well that sending Western troops to Ukraine is going to open up a can of worms, because essentially then it is a war between Russia and NATO, which is unfolding. And I think, of course, if we enter into that avenue, then we're in a World War III scenario, even with the possibility of the use of nuclear weapons. But again, as I stress, the underlying economic objectives of these wars is really what is making things move, so to speak. But it's very dangerous, because at the same time, the Western countries, and primarily it emanates from Washington and from Wall Street, is that there would be some kind of a peace negotiations in Switzerland, but Russia would not be invited. So now you want to establish peace, but you don't want to enter into any kind of diplomatic dialogue with the Russian Federation. So it's a little bit of an impasse, because the Swiss government has been confronted, and the Russians have told them, well, what kind of a peace treaty, a peace conference are you engaging in if you don't recognize that the Russian Federation should be involved in those peace negotiations. You can't negotiate peace just among yourselves. And that really gets back to George W. Bush's definition. He says, when you talk about war, you're talking about peace. Well, war, and that's the ideology. Everybody believes that this democracy of America, that everybody says, oh, our democracy, going back to 1776. Well, we are that we have to have war so as to achieve peace, and that's, of course, that is propaganda, and there's no war is a criminal undertaking. And the United States of America has been involved in wars ever since the founding. There are very few years that there wasn't a war. First, it was the war against the First Nations in North America. Then it was against the Spanish, and so on and so forth. They've been at war, for the last more than almost more than 200. Well, yeah, 200 years. I think if we're going to initiate peace initiatives in Ukraine, we have to confront our governments which have acted illegally. It's illegal to support Nazism. Okay? They will prosecute people in Germany for supporting Nazi ideology. Well, then let us prosecute these Western governments which are supporting the Nazi regime in Kiev, which have antecedents of having committed crimes against humanity and the killing of the Jewish population of Ukraine during World War II.
Thank you very much this week. I would like to invite you all to visit globalresearch.ca. You will be able to read more articles to document yourself. And also I invite you to become a member of this group of research, because you will receive each week an email with recent article wrote by the professor. It would be easier for you to be up to date in the information. And if you consider our work and you would like to be on the front line as well with us to inform in your network, please share the video, and you will have all the description in the video, under the video, to if you want to give something to support our work. I thank you very much for this week. Bye-bye.